The Night Rockdale Died, the July 4th, 1876 Flash Flood, a Telegraph Herald documentary. 145 years ago, the Tri-State suffered its most tragic natural disaster. In a few furious hours, a tiny, bustling village on the outskirts of Dubuque was wiped out, and with it, 39 lives. July 4th, 1876 was a day of celebrations across the country, as Americans honored their country's 100th birthday. Residents of Rockdale, a town built on the banks of Catfish Creek, 2 miles south of Dubuque, had mostly ended their centennial celebrations at about 10 p.m. when a light rain began to fall. The drizzle soon turned into sheets of pounding rain. A few minutes after midnight, Catfish Creek was running so deep that it cut off escape to higher ground. At 1 a.m., the dams at Rockdale Mills gave way, sending a surge of water down the creek and valley. Survivors estimated the creek was 20 feet deep and 2,000 feet wide. It would rip apart most of the houses and businesses in its path. Charles Timish was a young bartender who, after becoming alarmed at the rapidly rising water, stripped off his clothes and swam across the seething creek, carrying his money in his mouth. 3 sons of Peter Cap grabbed onto pieces of roofing and floated toward treetops, where they survived the flood. Reports said that one of the boys pulled his younger brother up by the hair and held him in his arms until morning. Storekeeper Gustav Horn got his family to the safety of his home's rafters, and, though the house was taken by the flood, the family survived. The Classens, a family of 8, also were among those trying to escape the roaring torrent. John Classen, who was celebrating his 6th birthday that day, recalled the events for a Telegraph Herald article in 1930. The water was rising rapidly. My parents knew there was no hope of safety inside. Outside, a veritable hell was raging. Peals of thunder and the crashing of buildings were already making a deafening noise, and the flashes of lightning in the darkness of the night illuminated our surroundings and made visible horrible sights too terrible to tell. We prepared for the worst. Unable to swim, I was placed on my brother's shoulders and told to hold tightly. When the house begins to move, we will jump, were the last words of my brother, Christian, 22, John said. After being swept into the dark, swirling waters, the 2 sons reached a piece of a floating roof. But hearing the screams of his younger sister, Lena, Christian swam back to rescue her. Classen's daughter, Kathy Hagman of Dubuque, remembers what her father told her about that night.
And he always said his sister called out the window, and then he saw the house. But now the paper says she was in the water. I don't know. But that's what he always told, that she hollered out the window. And that he went back to get her, and that's when the house went off the foundation.
His family home swept away, and John was now alone in the raging waters. He described the scene. Trembling, frightened, and almost scared to death, I was tossed about as I clung to the bit of board which floated over a quarter of a mile downstream. His raft eventually lodged between 2 elm trees, giving him time to climb high into one of the trees before the raft was washed away. There, he clung for the next 5 hours. The water rose until it reached my feet, John said. It must have been 40 feet deep. It was awful to hear the continuous thunder and crashing of objects carried down by the stream. Hagman recalls the horrifying sights her father saw.
But my dad told, too, about seeing the floating bodies going by whenever the lightning would flash. Then he said that really he was just hoping he could hold on to that tree.
When rescuers finally arrived, They could not at first coax the terrified young boy from his treetop. John, naked and bleeding, clung to his rescuer so tightly he nearly choked the man. Witnesses said it took only 30 minutes for the flash flood to wipe out the village and 39 of his residents. Among the dead was John's entire family, his parents, brother, and 4 sisters. The aftermath of the flood was evident the following morning. Telegraph lines were down, and bridges, roads, and railroad beds to and from the area were washed out. Rescuers pulled the few survivors to safety, then began the horrific task of searching for and removing the bodies of the dead from the piles of debris. An account in the Iowa State Register chronicled the scene. The corpses have been dug out of the sand, found lodged in trees or dead in the rooms in which they lived. A man and his wife were found embedded in the sand, dead, and clasped in each other's arms. The Dubuque Daily News reported, "From the house of Joseph Becker, 11 bodies were taken. Men, women, and children. A heart-rending sight to look upon." As bodies were recovered, they were brought to the mill to be washed and laid out. The newspaper noted, "It was enough to melt a heart of iron to look upon that floor clad with dead bodies." John remembered the scene. It was a horrible sight, one which words cannot picture. The bodies were mangled, bruised, and otherwise disfigured. The Klassen family dead were carried to a relative's house, where they were laid side by side. The emotional Daily News account of the scene read, "It is not possible to portray the sight presented by that dead family, the father, mother, and children side by side, close together in death, as they are said to have been in life." Little John Klassen was taken in by his uncle, Christian Klassen, and raised as part of the man's large Catholic family in Worthington, Iowa. Rockdale was never rebuilt. Today, the valley is lined with trees and fields and bears little evidence of the horrors wrought by nature nearly a century and a half ago.